Tonight on Primetime Politics, new trade barriers.
An increasing, escalating global trade war is in nobody's interest.
China imposes tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, and seafood, retaliation for Canadian tariffs on Chinese EVs. But can this country afford another trade challenge on top of the Donald Trump tariffs? Can anything be done to bring the temperature down? We'll examine the issue. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, Canada's economy got hit with new tariffs today, but this time the duties are not coming from the Trump administration. Instead, they come from the People's Republic of China. That country slapping tariffs on nearly $4 billion of Canadian goods, 100% on Canadian canola and canola products, 25% on Canadian pork and seafood. Retaliation for Canadian levies on Chinese electric vehicles imposed by the Trudeau government last year.
We are somewhat squeezed between tariff conflict with the United States, tariff conflict with China. There's no question, this is having an impact on the Canadian economy. It would certainly be better for all of us, all of our countries, if we can get back to more predictable, secure, open trading relationships.
Well, Guy Saint-Jacques was Canada's ambassador to the People's Republic of China from 2012 to 2016. Monsieur Saint-Jacques, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Serapio.
So, these tariffs that are coming from the People's Republic on canola, on pork, on the fisheries industry here in Canada, they really are this direct response to the tariffs Canada put onto Chinese EVs. And that policy, and bear with me here, that policy really was to be in line with the Biden administration in the United States. But we now have a different administration. Donald Trump does not seem to be concerned about Canada's economic well-being. Is it time for Canada to consider dropping those tariffs on Chinese EVs?
Well, I think that Canada will have to reassess its positions because, of course, the Chinese tariffs are very targeted. They are hitting canola again because our canola exports suffer a lot in 2019 after the arrest of Meng Wanzhou in December of the previous year. And pork producers also have been hit in the past, but I think it's the first time that seafood producers are being hit. And the timing is not accidental. It's to increase the pressure on Canada. In fact, the Chinese, I've seen a few declarations where they have said, look, don't you think it's time for you to reassess your relationship with the United States, to look at the way you are treated? And I think that's a fair point because we decided to follow the Biden administration. As you said, we applied the same tariffs, but we didn't get any brownie points with Donald Trump. And with the future of the North American Free Trade Agreement in question, I think we will have to reassess our full position. The Chinese have extended an offer to sit down to negotiate, and I think what also they have in mind is the fact that there will be a new government in Canada in about 2 months, and I think it's an opportunity to start afresh. And of course, for Ottawa, it will be a question of deciding what are our interests at play here, how to protect our values, and to draw some red lines of our own to say these are behaviors that we won't tolerate. And of course, in the meantime, we'll have to watch whether China will want to repeat what it did in the last 2 federal elections by interfering in the upcoming elections.
Yeah, interference, which will be a big issue. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But I want to get to your first point, this idea that perhaps Canada should reopen and take another look at its relationship with China. But I'm wondering what the limitations of that would be, because the detention of the two Michaels and what was happening with Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver certainly puts a limitation, it seems, on that. And now, just yesterday, we got confirmation that 4 Canadian citizens were executed in the People's Republic this year alone. So what limitations are we looking at if we're looking to revive or redefine our relationship with the People's Republic?
China is developed enough now that it will be probably willing to sit down and I would hope to change its behavior, to stop taking people hostage. On the question of this unfortunate development that we heard yesterday about the execution of 4 Canadians, I think this had to be expected because the Chinese have always been very adamant that they want to prevent drugs use from spreading in China. I was told this directly by Chinese official who had told me we will continue to apply the death penalty to drug trafficking. We don't want our countries to become similar to yours with your kind of problem. And by executing those 4 people that in fact got, it took much longer than usual. I'm more aware of the cases of 2 Canadians of Chinese origin who had been sentenced to death in the fall of 2018, but it took basically 6 years before they were executed. Usually people are executed in the months that follow the sentence. And so in a way, it's like if China decided to clear the deck to start afresh with a new Canadian government.
Start afresh with the new Canadian government. But, and quickly running out of time, but is it possible to just have a trade relationship with China and be able to ignore everything else, or how does that move forward?
Well, I think that's why we have to talk with the Europeans and to stop the most egregious behavior of China. But I think, we are still, in terms of trade, we are doing well. Last year, just under $30 billion worth of export. Of course, 4 billion of canola, 8.7 of other agricultural products. There are still business opportunities in China. Exporters have to be careful. And there's still work that needs to be done to make this a more reliable partner. But it's a partner, I think, that we cannot ignore, especially at a time when we want to diversify our trade.
Guy Saint-Jacques, thank you for this. Appreciate the time this evening.
Thank you.
So we will continue to follow what happens with the Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, and seafood. And we'll also see if Ottawa revisits its own tariffs on Chinese EVs. But without a doubt, diversifying markets is a major focus for governments and Canadian business right now. And that includes reviving talk about pipelines across the country. Today in Edmonton, Mark Carney was asked about that very issue. Now, the event was about housing, but take a listen to what the Prime Minister said to a direct question about pipelines, asked if he is committed, not just open to them, but committed to getting pipelines built.
It's about getting things done. It's about getting, yes, pipelines built across this country so that we can displace imports of foreign oil. It's about building out the energy infrastructure more broadly here in Alberta, which I would add would include projects such as the pathways. It's about building energy corridors and trade corridors, including potentially up from here through to Nunavut. So we have additional deep water ports and opportunities there. And so the commitment is to deliver those projects like those that we agree that are national priorities, and then the federal government using all of its power, including new legislative powers or new legislation, in order to accelerate delivering those projects.
Prime Minister Mark Carney in Edmonton. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader was in Jonquière, Quebec today, and he too was focused on getting natural resources to market, promising should Conservatives win the next election, they would create what would be shovel-ready zones, areas identified for industrial development that would be pre-approved for large-scale projects like pipelines and mines, with the hope of speeding up development and eliminating uncertainty for investors.
Elsewhere in the world, these projects are being built without any subsidies. In the States, they built 8 LNG plants in the last 10 years. We've completed 0. There's only one that's almost coming online, and that was approved by the previous Harper government. The Qataris have almost doubled their production. They've signed supply agreements with France to supply Qatari gas to France that we could be supplying. The Germans built an import terminal for natural gas from concept to completion in 194 days. And in Canada, it takes 14 years just to get a permit. The problem is not that investors don't want to invest. It's that they're terrified of spending millions or billions of dollars on lawyers, applications, consultations, accountants, etc., all to get to a maybe or a no. What I'm proposing today with these shovel-ready zones is to give them pre-approval so that when they put the money, when they step up to the plate, they already know that they have a permit and what they have to do to comply with that permit. That's how we're going to put Canada first and bring the jobs home.
Okay, well, a minute ago, we just heard from the Prime Minister, and yesterday, Mark Carney met his advisory council on Canada-U.S. relations for the first time since being sworn in. Tariffs, not surprisingly, a big part of that discussion. Arlene Dickinson is one of the country's best-known business leaders, managing general partner at District Ventures Capital. She sits on that advisory council with the Prime Minister, and I spoke to her earlier today. Arlene, always good to see you. Thank you for being with us again.
Michael, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
So listen, I want to start with these new Chinese tariffs that started very early this morning. You know, China is Canada's second largest export market. Did they at all come up in your meeting with the Prime Minister yesterday? Was anything said about that?
I mean, specifically with regards to China, no, but what was mentioned was agriculture and the impact on our farmers and on our agricultural sector and what it's going to mean with the tariffs that are coming into play. So, you know, the conversation was around tariffs in general and the impact on all of the sectors that will be feeling the pain, in particular, if you think about the canola growers, very big impact.
Yeah, very big, as we know. You know, when the Prime Minister was told about the pain, and you know, acknowledging the fact that this was Prime Minister Carney's first time leading the advisory council as Prime Minister, what was said about the concerns farmers have given this moment? You know, yes, China, but also the United States.
Right. I mean, when we think about agriculture and agri-food and how important the sector is to Canada, we can think about, again, how do we make sure that we are creating processing and production here at home so that we can export to other markets outside of the ones that you've just identified. I mean, these are big customers to replace, and they're going to be difficult to replace, but we have to find a way through that, and we have to find a way to ensure that our farmers are protected and supported through what's going to be a very difficult time.
Yeah, difficult time, and you know, that's farmers specifically, but I'm wondering what was said about the challenge of the next little while, because I think a lot of Canadians still don't know what's going to come down the pipes, and there have been immediate impacts. I'm thinking particularly with steel workers, aluminum workers in this country, but in terms of a greater pain across industries, what was being said about what is ahead for Canadians?
You know, one of the things that Prime Minister Carney did focus on was the importance of and the need for urgent action, and to make sure that we're doing things right away to help counter what is happening. At the end of the day, you know, he had a line that really stuck with me, which was, we can do more for ourselves than he can ever do to us. In other words, it's really about, we can take this moment to build Canada and to help ensure that we aren't as vulnerable ever again. And I do believe that, you know, there's a lot of measures in place. There's a lot of things that are going to have to happen across multiple sectors. This is a multi-pronged approach. This is not just one sector, not just the steel, not just the aluminum, not just the auto workers, not just the farmers. It's impacting everybody. Tariffs are, you know, they never ever help consumers. They never help the everyday citizen. They only ever help, you know, governments figure out how to take more power. And I think that's what we're seeing the result of here with some of the tariffs that are being imposed. They are not about helping people. And Americans are going to feel the pain. Canadians are going to feel the pain. And this is unfortunate that the people that can least afford it are the ones that are going to have the largest impact. And so the government has to be very cognizant of ensuring that there's programs and help in place to support those people that are going to feel that pain.
How quickly do you think that will come into place? I know the government has talked about EI benefits and sharing part-time jobs in order to spread out hours for people who may be compromised. What other actions, how quickly might we actually see them?
I think quite quickly. I mean, EI is a solution. It is not the solution. I think what we have to do is create jobs. We have to figure out how to support everything from our housing sector through to our agricultural sector, and we have to make sure that we're building. And then to do that, you actually end up creating employment. So what we don't want is programs that just, keep people afloat. What we want is programs that actually help drive people forward. And I believe that's what the Prime Minister is focused on.
So programs to guide people forward, and we know that there have been actions taken in terms of trying to diversify markets by the very fact that Prime Minister Carney started his term in office going to Paris and London to talk with traditional allies. We know that premiers are talking about internal trade. How quickly are those things progressing, Arlene? Because I think those are the things, in the window that Canadians look to as perhaps some hopeful points in this moment.
Yeah, there are. And I think one of the things that, we can all do a better job of is communicating some of those positive moments forward, because there's so much happening that I don't know that the communication is as strong as it could be from any corner. And that's across all governments and across all provinces and across the federal government as well. So, I think looking out for more communication, better inform Canadians so people understand what's happening. Interprovincial trade barriers are starting to come down. We are seeing action on a variety of fronts, and that needs to be communicated effectively.
Now, we are about to enter a federal election campaign, after which one of the parties will have a mandate from the Canadian people. Do you think that's going to help the situation? Because we have been essentially in this period of transition since early January.
Yeah, I believe that having the mandate by the voters is going to actually help significantly. But what I can say is that I did not see any hesitation from Prime Minister Carney to be motivated to act while he is in power now and hopefully into the future, or not into the future. There's an election that's going to take place. So whoever is voted in is going to be the Prime Minister and is going to make those decisions. But we can't stop and wait for that. We have to keep moving. I think that's what you're going to see.
Okay. Well, Arlene, you've been very generous in sharing with us your moments in the council. So thank you for this evening. I appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
Well, let's continue the conversation as our next guest has written and spoken out against the Trump tariffs for over 10 years. Steve Schmidt ran Republican campaigns and war rooms, including those for George W. Bush and John McCain's presidential bids. He has since left the Republican Party and has founded a Substack called The Warning with Steve Schmidt. Steve Schmidt, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Happy to be with you.
So as I said, you have written and essentially come to Canada's defense by criticizing Trump's languaging around making this country the 51st state. Why did you decide to do that?
It's a moral outrage, and every American should feel outraged by it. Canada is a charter member of the nations that rebuilt the world from the ashes. Canadian boys landed on Juno Beach next to American and British and French and Poles and Dutch and all of the members of the United Nations that together came to a redwood grove in Muir Woods outside of San Francisco to remember the life of Franklin Roosevelt. And the plaque there commemorates it and his life on behalf of the United Nations that he founded as an apostle of peace. Roosevelt and Mackenzie King, the Canadian Prime Minister, late at night in the 1944, 1945 timeframe are imagining the world to be. And Roosevelt says to him that he hopes it will endure for as long as everybody who is alive on the day the war is won is still alive. The youngest of those people are 80 years old. What Donald Trump is smashing is the Atlantic Charter, is the agreements in Quebec and Tehran and Yalta that laid the foundation for the greatest period of prosperity in world history. And as an American, one of the great blessings we have is the great nation to our north that we are intertwined with by family connection, by blood connection, by sacrifice. And Canada, the oldest bilingual democracy in the world, the second largest landmass in the world, is a great force for good. And America is blessed to share the longest undefended boundary in world history with Canada. And the American people and American presidents all through our history have recognized this relationship and its dignity. And there are a lot of Americans who are as outraged as Canadians are about the attack upon it.
Why do you think Donald Trump is so obsessed with Canada and this languaging of annexing our country? Is there actually something he wants out of Canada, or is this political distraction for what's going on in the United States?
I think Donald Trump's threat should be taken very seriously. He waited for 2 hours on a phone for Vladimir Putin to pick up. I can't explain to you what his fetish is, what it may be. I just know that Donald Trump admires every strongman and autocrat. It seems to have fantasies that they together will divide up the world, that he's some sort of Caesar, a new king, that Elon Musk is his duke, his prime minister, free to roam the planet, spending hundreds of millions of dollars here and there to destabilize democracy while delivering Hitler salutes that he says are not Hitler salutes, and so on and so forth. The reality is that Donald Trump is a predator who sees riches in Canada, does not see our shared values and ideals. He sees things. He looks at the ground and he sees gold, and he says that's what makes us rich, not our ideals, not our values, not what Thomas Paine talked about, a quality that is celestially priced and priced high indeed, which is freedom. Donald Trump doesn't understand the concept, doesn't appreciate it. When you talk about pluralism, when you talk about democracy, when you talk about equality, he thinks those are weak and wishy-washy words. He's a man who looks at Vladimir Putin and he sees strength, and he believes that might makes right, and he's a taker. So he looks at Canada and he says, what can I take from our friend, because he perceives Canada as weak and doesn't see that hidden beneath the benign nature of the Canadian people is a great strength, and that strength is bound by the commitment to maintain freedom.
Now, you say, in fact, that Canada needs to be a rattlesnake and strike back against Trump. What do you mean by that? What should Canada be doing right now?
Well, the rattlesnake is a great animal to use as a metaphor. Best way to avoid a snake bite is don't pick up the snake. This is a $1 trillion trading relationship, and if Canada is to be pushed into a recession by Donald Trump's madness, then what Canada needs to do is push America into recession. That the politician who seems most to understand Donald Trump in Canada is Premier Doug Ford, who appreciates that when a bully puts a finger in your chest, you break it. You don't take a step backwards. And if it comes to it, the American people need to have the lights turned out on them by the Premier of Ontario to get their attention that Donald Trump's economic war, and it is an economic war, will not be cost-free for Americans. And so Donald Trump has to be stopped. And what stops Donald Trump is a quick cratering of the economy by people escalating and not being pushed around, not being jerked around, whim from erratic whim day to day, while 40 million people are made to feel anxious, unsafe. Our democracies are bound together by what Roosevelt called the four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of faith and religion, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. And Donald Trump is using fear as a weapon, and he's trying to destabilize the economy to weaken Canada politically. And what I would say is to Canadians, do not spend $1 in the United States. Do not go on vacation in the United States. It's a $20 billion part of the American economy. Take it away. What I say to Americans who are friends of Canada, go to Canada on vacation this summer. Go ski in Canada this winter. Stand by Canada as Canada is under assault and attack by an American president who seeks to obliterate what generations of Americans and Canadians built together, which is a model for human dignity across a vast frontier. And so the answer to all of this is no thank you. We have to hold firm, and we have to make clear that Donald Trump's White House understands both the American side of the border and the Canadian side of the border will not tolerate this insanity.
Steve Schmidt, I appreciate the time. Thank you for the words this evening.
My pleasure.
Well, before we leave you this evening, we do want to note that the First Ministers will be meeting tomorrow. It will be Mark Carney's first meeting with all provincial and territorial leaders since becoming Prime Minister. And today, well, we got an early look at some of the issues that will be addressed. They do include China's tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, and seafood. Take a listen.
I will say that I have been encouraged by the sense that what's coming from the U.S. right now is that Canada will get favorable treatment in whatever regime they propose on April 2nd. What favorable treatment means remains to be seen, and that could obviously change tomorrow with the president.
Meanwhile, the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith did meet with the Prime Minister today in Edmonton, so ahead of the larger meeting tomorrow of First Ministers. And take a look at some of the statement that she released later in the day. At his request, she says, "I met with Prime Minister Mark Carney today. We had a very frank discussion in which I made it clear that Albertans will no longer tolerate the way we've been treated by the federal Liberals over the past 10 years. I also made it clear," she says, "that Alberta, as owner of the resource, will not accept an export tax or restriction on Alberta's oil and gas to the United States, and that our province is no longer agreeable to subsidizing other large provinces who are fully capable of funding themselves," which is a reference to equalization. Which already means then it's going to be a very interesting meeting tomorrow. We're going to have full coverage of that for you right here on CPAC. As for Primetime Politics, that is our program for this evening. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.